This video concerns the modus operandi of trafficking for sexual exploitation. As part of the ELEC THB project, we've conducted a mapping regarding the latest trends and modus operandi of traffickers in Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, and Ukraine. As part of this, we've collected a statistical overview from country data available, conducted a desk review, including collection of relevant media articles and case examples, and have conducted selected interviews with authorities, businesses, and third sector actors in 2022. In addition, we hired La Strada International to conduct mappings focusing on the most recent trafficking trends and risks in Poland and Ukraine. Regarding trafficking for sexual exploitation, for many years, this is still the most commonly identified form of trafficking in the global level, as well as within Europe. During the COVID-19 pandemic, 24% fewer victims were identified according to UNODC trafficking report, as traffickers pushed victims to less visible and unsafe locations, and obviously it was more difficult for the authorities and NGOs to encounter victims as well and to identify them. However, in the whole of European Union, there was a 10% increase in the number of registered victims of trafficking from 2020 to 21, according to Eurostat statistics. In the recent years, figures related to detection of human trafficking have been increasing in Latvia and Finland and decreasing in Ukraine, Estonia, and Poland. Regarding the victim profile in these sex trafficking cases, the victims are mainly, but not exclusively, women and girls. Also, boys and men and transgender individuals can become victims of sex trafficking. It is common that the perpetrators take advantage of the victim's vulnerable position, which may be, for example, due to their poverty, disability, young age, or substance abuse issues. The perpetrators might mislead people, threaten or blackmail them or their families, and trap them in situations of debt bondage in order to subject them to sexual exploitation. The victims are often moved within different countries, regions, and cities, so that they have customers in one place, they are moved to another one, and this is a way for the perpetrators to also avoid attention by the authorities in those different countries and cities and locations. It is common in the sex trafficking cases that victims have very little or no say in whether they wish to sell sex, to whom they sell these services to, when they work, and what kind of services they offer in the first place. And they might not be able to leave the situation without facing serious consequences. Recruitment often nowadays takes place online, and perpetrators may do so using different kinds of fake profiles that suggest wealth and high standard of living. Often recruitment is done using apps such as Viber, Telegram, WhatsApp, or as well as using the more traditional Facebook. Obviously, this kind of deceptive recruitment relies on promises of great wages and opportunities and good conditions. So-called lover boy method is often used in cases where typically a male perpetrator seduces a young vulnerable girls or boys in order to then put them later in a situation of sexual exploitation. Previously, this process took more time, but there are signs that this is now becoming more faster and faster. and the lover boys nowadays proceed more quickly in placing the victims in situation of exploitation. Psychological control is a very important issue in human trafficking cases. When we mapped the 5 countries, we noticed and identified a shift from using physical control to the use of more subtle means of control. And this is extremely relevant for different forms of exploitation, especially sexual exploitation, but also for labor trafficking, forced criminality, and other forms of trafficking. As a result, the exploitation might not be so visible for the outsiders because the victims are not restricted in their everyday life activities. So people are not locked into their workplaces and they could basically move, but the chains are invisible. The offenders may pressure and force victims in complex ways that are difficult to detect during the investigation, and these are often based on establishment of a personal relationship with the victim, and indeed trauma bond is used also in this vein. These factors pose major challenges in investigation and prosecution of human trafficking cases by law enforcement authorities, as well as criminal justice authorities. We've also identified that more and more exploitation is becoming such that it takes place in multiple forms. So this means that victims of trafficking for sexual exploitation may also be exploited in other ways. For example, they might be forced into criminal activity, or they could also have a role in recruiting other victims, or, for example, collecting money from the other victims. They may also be forced to sign paperwork for establishing fraudulent companies established in their name, or to get loans or credit cards or benefits in their name, which are again used by the traffickers to maximize their profits. Finally, it is very important to realize that access to justice, especially for victims of sexual exploitation, might be very difficult. This is first because they face stigma and fear and shame, and are therefore very reluctant to disclose their experiences to the authorities. But secondly, also because it often requires active work from the police to detect and investigate such crimes.